To begin with, I'd like to answer any questions about the get-together in Washington in March. And John, you and I talked about you joining via Zoom, but since we're having this session now, that's probably not necessary. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So for everyone's awareness, we will be getting together through the weekend. We've got rehearsals scheduled at St. John's Lafayette Square, a very famous church that is in the midst of our own political situation right now. Please plan, we're going to start at 7:30 on Friday, and we've got rehearsals scheduled on Saturday, 9:30 to 3:30, and also on Sunday at 1 to 3. In addition, Rob Fisher, you may know, he is the rector at St. John's. We could not arrange to sing as part of the St. John's services because they've got all the music planned out. But Rob would like us to show up for their after service coffee hour after the 11 o'clock service. So do encourage you to take part in that. We'll see what else develops during that weekend. There is one complicated factor. That's right, Steve. Sunday coffee hour is around, 12 noon. Episcopal services tend to be verbose, so I think 12:15 or 12:30 is more likely, but it'll be after the service. So I'm sure it'd be great if you could attend the 11 o'clock service. I'm sure Rob will have nice things to say from the pulpit to greet us. And then we'll have an opportunity to sing a few songs during coffee hour. And stay tuned. We will give you details of that. Just as a reminder, we will be there under the name the Yale University International Chorus. So to make sure everyone's aware of this, we decided in consultation with John that although we think that Russian has broader connotations, in the Caucasus, Russian means Russian. And so actually calling ourselves a Russian chorus makes people think that all we do is sing Russian music. Whereas in fact, we are, and to actually elaborate, we are the Yale University International Chorus Diplomats of Song is the subtitle. Good. Okay. Good. So, and of course, we will, in our marketing materials, explain who we are and why we're there, which we'll have to do anyway. But at any rate, we are going to be present in Washington as an international chorus. We sing Georgian and Armenian music too, not just Russian music. And we'll see what else happens. There is a bit of a conflict. The campus chorus took two gigs on Sunday out in Salisbury, Maryland. And Ernie knows that even makes Annapolis look close to DC by comparison.
Right. We're a lot closer than Salisbury.
Right. So we don't know at this point how much participation we're going to have of the campus chorus. They're going to have to get out to Salisbury at some point. But people in the DC area who would like to make the trip out to Salisbury, great. But we decided we want to stick and have the session here in DC. Let's see, I think there was a chat question. Will we okay, John Mark asked a question about the March tour. I don't know. I have some information about the March tour. Of course, that's different from our rehearsal of our group in Washington. I'll send a note about what I know about the March tour.
So Louis, I think I'm
later.
confused here. I was just curious in the rehearsals that you're doing, as you were describing, if there's any ability to participate virtually. I didn't get the sense there is. I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts there.
Well,
Are,
my feeling,
are we gonna Zoom any of the DC rehearsals? Is that what you're asking?
that's the
Yes,
question.
exactly.
Yeah. Um, we haven't discussed it yet, I
Okay.
suppose.
We'll have to
Well, if you
look
are,
into it and see, the logistics, and it would be quite long, and it would require somebody managing the Zoom and not rehearsing. So we'll talk it over, but my guess is probably not. What we might do is record some of the sessions and we could post some of those recordings. But I think doing something live adds complication.
Mhm. Okay.
Just to quickly jump in on that,
yeah.
John, Mark, and Louis, we do this with Apollo Club. It would be rough and ready. Depending on the church's Wi-Fi, we can just open a Zoom. It'll be inelegant, but if you're free at those times,
People could follow along.
you could just jump on and
Yeah.
nobody would help you out or talk you through anything. We just have a
Yeah.
laptop or a tablet or a phone, and we'd open it up and run it for the course of the rehearsal, and then you'd participate however you found it useful. I
Yeah.
don't think we'd spend a lot of time
The laptop mics are
guiding
often,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
the laptop mics are often quite directional and don't pick up good ambient.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it wouldn't be great, but it would, on the other hand, you'd hear the sound of I hope 15 or more guys people in the room.
yeah.
So we'll see what we can do. And I agree with Steve. I just don't want one of us feeling obligated to act as cameraman during the session. Okay, so that's it for the March get together. So John, over to you.
Okay, well, greetings, everybody. I'm John Graham. Thrilled to be working on this tour. It's so exciting to have singers come over here. The reason that I came to Georgia almost 22 years ago was as an amateur singer, a lover of Georgian polyphony. And I had been singing world music my whole life and just fell in love with Georgian music while I was undergraduate at Wesleyan University up the road from Yale. And I made friends with the current Yale Russian Chorus members at that time back in 2002 and 3, and told them I was really in love with Georgian music and actually got your copy of Shen Charvenachi from the archives. And later read it and learned all about that story. I think I interviewed a few of you when I was a postgraduate student at the Yale Divinity School, Institute of Sacred Music, because I did a presentation on the Yale Russian Chorus members learning that chant from Rustavi Ensemble in 1968. And I think I quoted a couple of you that I had interviewed then. I'll have to go back and look at it. In any case, Yale Russian Chorus has had a long history with Georgian polyphony and with helping to spread this music in the West. And it's been influential in my path in discovering more about Georgian music history to keep coming up and keep having these meetings with members of the choir. Over the years, I started this travel business. I started in 2006, and over the years, many alumni of the Yale Russian Chorus have come on my tours. And so I've gotten to learn even more. So I'm thrilled now to have this opportunity to welcome an even larger group of you to come here and share your love of the polyphony of this part of the world. So At this point, we have the itinerary basically set up. All of the concerts are the main pieces of the itinerary in place. The concerts are there. We're getting into the phase where we need to ramp up publicity efforts. So one of the things I'm going to ask is if anyone has any sort of graphic design skills or the ability to put together nice fonts and colors with a picture or two. We need some sort of template flyer that then we can manipulate for different concerts with different dates. But we need that basic template. And if anybody in the choir has something like that, maybe it could be recycled from a previous tour or it could be designed afresh. We need something like that.
Let me
Because
stop and reiterate what John just said. Do we have a volunteer on this call who would be willing to play that role? One way or the other, we need somebody. So do we have a volunteer on this call? Fine. I'll follow up with you, John, but just for the record, we have no volunteers, so we will plan accordingly.
Okay, well, we'll keep looking. Maybe someone that you know, someone on this call, someone you know would be willing to volunteer to put our name, our brand, our title, and the purpose of our tour. And we want to have a blurb on there saying what kind of repertory we're singing, as highlighting Armenian, Georgian, American repertories, and others, that type of thing. So I have almost all of your flight details. I've sent out now all of the rooming requests to all the hotels. So basically, a lot of the logistics are in place. So we're really getting into the details, and that's when it becomes more interesting and more exciting. Shall I go over the itinerary briefly, or is that something we can just read about later? What do you think, Lewis?
Well, why don't we do this? Let me share my screen with the itinerary, and we can just sort of scroll. And if there's anything that you want to talk,
Okay,
we can do that. How's that sound to you? Okay,
that sounds good.
let me just pull it up, and then we'll be ready to go. Just
Okay. So I'll just get started since I've got it memorized.
got it.
So most people are arriving to Tbilisi, almost everyone really. And many of you are coming in a day or two early, which is great. You'll have some time to acclimate to the time zone. The first general meeting's a rehearsal that we've added at the beginning. So that'll be at 3 p.m. somewhere near the hotel. I'm looking at for rehearsal spaces there currently, but we'll definitely have that in place by the time we need to go. And then the first meal we'll share together is that dinner on the 21st. We need to get a good night's rest because we're pulling out at 9 in the morning in our bus, and we'll be going directly to Yerevan with a number of stops along the way. The first being the border, and then shortly after the border, which is very simple. You know, think of the sleepiest border crossing you've ever been to. No one really needs visas. We do need to get out, sort of get our passports checked, and then go on through. But no big deal there. There's nobody with guns. It's not like a security environment in any way. There's no real smuggling on this border. So it's just a routine kind of stamping of the passports. Tourists are going through all the time. So on the other side, our first stop will be the Hagpat Monastery, which is a UNESCO heritage site and a really wonderful place to sing. So I think besides the rehearsal, that'll be the first place where we feel like we're really in the Caucasus singing in medieval stone chapels, which were built to have fantastic acoustics, primarily for the function of performing the liturgy, which is always sung in this part of the world. The whole liturgy is sung. Either the priests or the deacons are intoning or the choir is responding. So at Hagpat Monastery, we'll have a chance to sing together in some beautiful acoustic spaces. We'll also meet our Armenian guide there who will take us around and tell us the history. We'll have lunch. And after that, we go to Yerevan. Since our concert, we weren't able to schedule it for the 24th, but we were only able to get the main concert hall on the 23rd. That means that right when we arrive on the 22nd, I'm going to try and have a television crew meet us, and we might need to do some type of publicity gig. We're going to get off the bus, and we're going to just somewhere in some nice locale, we're going to sing a couple of pieces, send a couple of our representatives to do just some sound bites so that they can get it on the evening news or the next morning news. Small
John,
thing.
Ray has a question.
Yeah. Is it in the chat or?
No,
No, he
I
raised his
just,
hand.
yeah, I
Oh,
just
okay.
wanted to mention anybody who's not a U.S. citizen might actually need a visa, which is not a big deal, but you have to. It's better to do it ahead of time. So I, being a Canadian, I needed a visa to go to Armenia. So I don't know
Okay.
if anybody else is in that boat, but
Very good point, Ray. I'll be sure in about a month before the tour, I'm going to send around a lot of additional sort of logistical materials, the finer itinerary, all of the airport arrivals, departures, rooming lists, etc. All of that will come around for everyone to review, and I'll also put in something there about visas. You can get them online, kind of an e-visa situation, I believe. And if that doesn't work, you can also get it at the border. But like Ray says, it's preferable to get in advance just to streamline the process at the border. Okay, so publicity event when we arrive in Yerevan, not ideal, but we have to do it because television is one of the major ways that we're going to advertise our concert. Then we have we're in a downtown hotel. It's walking distance to the Opera House and the main pedestrian street, and we're right near the Manuscript Museum. There's lots of things to do with free time there. There's lots of restaurants within walking distances. I think everyone will really enjoy it. We're also kind of on the upper side of the city, so you can walk out of the hotel and have a view over the whole city towards Mount Ararat, the famous mountain of Armenia, the sacred mountain of Armenia. So we'll be staying there 3 nights. The following day is May 23rd, and this day will mostly be dedicated towards getting us ready for our concert. So rehearsal in the morning, free time. Then we go to the hall. We have rehearsal with our collaborating choir, meet their conductor, meet their members. Hopefully we're going to have a couple of pieces that we sing together. So we'll rehearse those together. We'll have separate rehearsals as well. And then time to change into our concert dress, concert, and then a post-concert reception. So that's standard procedure. We're on a concert tour. Everyone knows the drill. We have to be at the right place at the right time on this day. So
Let
moving
me,
on.
for those who are not familiar with the Sargmosergu and Ensemble, they are an all-male sacred music, Armenian. So what we sing with them, there will be heavy emphasis on sacred music and our Armenian repertoire, most likely. Like all sacred musicians, they know Komitas, so I'm sure we'll find something that we can sing together.
Yeah. And we are in the major concert hall in Yerevan for chamber music. Beautiful space, and it's pretty close. So we should be able to walk there from our hotel. But those sorts of little logistics we'll figure out later. Okay, so the next day is a free day. People can do what they like. You can schedule events as you like. We'll have a lot of suggestions. We have a tour guide. The tour guide and I are offering this optional cultural program, which are going to some of the favorite places that I always take visitors, and especially the Gerhard Monastery is half of it was carved out of the mountain. And so a couple of the chapels there are rock hewn. They're like in the mountain, and they have incredible acoustics. People love to sing there. I love to sing there. So this is why we got to go there. Louis, I see you're showing the older program here. For some reason it says Echmiadzin, but I did change it. And we'll go to Gerhard Monastery. So I'll have the whole updated itinerary for everybody once we get going. So that's a day program that we would leave in the morning and then be back in the late afternoon, and then a free evening. The following day, we drive from Yerevan. This is now Sunday, May 25th. We drive from Yerevan back to Tbilisi. We'll drive back on a different road, which takes us past Lake Sevan, a huge freshwater lake, like 7,000 feet. And there's a couple of beautiful monasteries there that we'll visit on the way. But basically, it's a driving day with a number of stops along the way to do our thing, sing in beautiful stone chapels. These are the moments that I think really make these tours a lot of fun. Of course, we have to program the concerts, but it's all of these in-between moments, the traveling moments, the times that we get to sing spontaneously, the people that we meet when we sing. Because whenever you sing somewhere, people come out of the woodwork and say, "Oh, that was so beautiful, that was amazing. That reminds me of this time or my friends." And we get to meet people and interact with people in those places. And music is always this universal language that helps to break down any preconceptions or stereotypes, and so people just really share from their heart and will welcome and receive us warmly when we put our best foot forward with our song. It's amazing what magic can occur. I know all of you have experienced that because you're veterans of choir tours, but those are some of the moments that I enjoy the most. Okay, so Sunday, May 26th happens to be Georgian Independence Day. And what that means is that there will be a lot of there will be a parade in Tbilisi. There will be stages set up with some concerts and so forth. And basically, it'll be an interesting day to wander around Tbilisi if that's what you'd like to do. It's a free day. If you don't want to, if you already have other free time in Tbilisi, or you've already been in Tbilisi, or you're staying a day after the tour, we also have a free morning on Tuesday, May 27th. So for those people that would like to get out of the city, I'm offering the second optional cultural program. And this would be to go east of Tbilisi into the viticulture region. There's lots of vineyards. It looks like rolling hills of Tuscany type of thing, beautiful view of the Caucasus Mountains. And we'll go to a few historic monasteries, try and do some singing, have a nice lunch in the walled fortress town of Signagi, which is a major tourist destination for a reason. It's a beautiful place. And go to the museum there, and then we'll come back. So that's...
So if I might jump in, John. So
yeah.
I would say Georgian Independence Day would be the great opportunity to engage as a guerrilla chorus singing on the street, if that's what people want to do. But of course, if everyone goes off to do the cultural program, then we won't have a quorum to do that. So I think the question is really for the group, and I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so we can see each other's screen.
Mm-hmm.
What's your preference, to have an organized choral cultural outing, or to engage as guerrilla diplomats of song?
You want to raise hands?
Who's in favor of just singing on the street in Tbilisi? Who is in favor of a cultural outing? All right. So
if I can just jump in, I mean, I've been to Signagi numerous times. It is beautiful, and Tbilisi is a great place, but in my experience, some of the best things in Georgia are when you get outside the city.
Yeah, I would agree, Ray, totally with that sentiment. Just wherever you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see if we can manage both of those somehow.
Sure.
We
Those
can
who want to do A and
some
those who
guerrilla
want to do B.
singing.
A quorum for street singing is 3 people, right? So
Right,
True,
exactly.
right.
We can do some guerrilla singing, and before they get us, we jump on the bus and head out of town.
And you can do guerrilla singing wherever you happen to be in Georgia. That's the beautiful part.
Also true. Yeah.
All
Okay.
right, so let's zoom through the rest of this program and then open it up to Q&A. So I didn't organize a concert on the Independence Day because there are other concerts, other stages, and this is all government sponsored, and they want government friendly kind of television publicity. They've got pop stars out there and people that make the government look good. So it wasn't really a fit for us.
We don't
I'm
do that at
gonna-
all on the 4th of July here. We don't do that ever for any reason, you know.
Yeah.
No, that's, of course we do.
So I've scheduled our Tbilisi concert for the next day, Tuesday, May 27th. So this day will be dedicated to the rehearsals and the concert. And right now we have a free morning there. We do have the possibility of another event. Still working on whether that's feasible for us and desirable. If we wanted to sing at another, there's a university here with a student choir, and there's talk about doing an event with the student choir at the university at say 1 or 2 p.m. So that's a question mark. You know, do we have enough concerts and it would be better to leave free time and we're going to get a lot of singing in anyway, or should we schedule another event and take away some of that free time? I'm open to either.
Be aware, I'm trying to arrange a meeting with an expert on Georgian Russian relations at the Caucasian Research Center. So if that happens, it probably would happen during the day on the 27th. It wouldn't happen on the 26th.
Okay. So maybe we should leave that free time so that people that want to attend that lecture could do that. All right. So this, we have a lot of incredible singers in Georgia, but given the history between YRC and the Rustavi Ensemble, I've specifically courted their current leadership, and they've agreed to do this concert with us, which I think is a real honor. It's a real, you know, they have new members, of course, they're constantly changing, and it's not going to be members that you recognize from recordings and so forth, but they're still a state ensemble, top ranked, incredibly good singers, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to do a concert with them. And again, we're going to try and do some collaboration. So we'll definitely sing at least one Georgian piece with the Rustavi Ensemble to end the concert, and they may learn an American piece too if we can make that work, and they would also sing that with us. And those would be the two pieces that we would rehearse together from 4 to 6 o'clock, or at least a chunk of that time in the hall. And our concert hall is in the National Library. That is a 19th century building and has on the top floor a large hall with kind of a domed glass roof. And it's a very aesthetically pleasing venue, nice venue. It's not a major concert hall with seats going away. In fact, we'll be singing on the same level as the seats, but you can see you can put at least 160 people in there, and with a good acoustic, and they have a piano on site, and a lot of high class events are held there, like book presentations. Back in the day when we used to create CDs, choirs would present their CDs, their new CD concerts would be held there. So that's why I chose that venue. It's also right downtown and we can easily walk there. Okay, so the next day we've been in Tbilisi 3 nights. The next day we pack up, we drive to Mtskheta, which is only an hour away, see some UNESCO heritage sites, then continue over towards over the pass into West Georgia, and we have a kind of a village event in Baghdati. I know that part of the YRC mission is cultural exchange and outreach, and this fits that kind of category. There's a cultural center there that's keen on welcoming guests, and they have a number of choirs. They have kind of a semi-professional young men's choir, and they have a couple of children's choirs. They have a cultural center with a church next to it. So this is all still in discussion mode, but we're going to show up, be good guests, and sing a short, like maybe we'll sing 6 songs or something. They'll perform, we'll listen. There'll be some food, there'll be some wine. A bishop might show up. It's going to be one of those situations that we just go with the flow. And at a certain point, I'm going to blow the whistle and we're going to hightail it out of there so we can get to Kutaisi, which is about an hour away, in time to check into our hotel and then free evening that night. Our hotel in Kutaisi, where we'll be staying 2 nights, is right downtown in the pedestrian zone with lots of restaurants all around. And Kutaisi is a super friendly town of about 250,000, right on the river. It's said to have been the center of the Colchian Empire that traded with ancient Greece. So it's got a long, storied history in it. And I think you'll find Kutaisi a very nice city to be in for a couple of days. So the next day is Thursday, May 29th. And that's our concert day. So we're going to be focused on getting on television in the morning. The arrangement of Shen Charvenachi that you learned from Rustavi Ensemble in 1968 was arranged by Zakaria Paliashvili, who's from Kutaisi and has a house museum there. So they already know about us coming, and they're going to help with publicity. And they begged us to come to that house museum, which we can walk to from the hotel. So I think that's a good place to do our press event. It's paying our dues to an important composer in Georgian history. He composed the first 2 operas in 1919 and 1921. He worked on liturgical music and published that his Liturgia, which included that Shen Charvenachi, in 1909. So his dates are like right around the turn of the century. So we'll go there, and then let's see. Yeah, we basically have a free day until our afternoon rehearsal. We'll have a guide, in addition to myself, a Georgian guide who's going to lead an optional, and this one's free, just walking tour of Kutaisi to include some of the places that you see there. Spice Vegetable Market, walk up to the 11th century Bagrat Cathedral, opportunity to sing there if we like, with a fantastic acoustic. So if we can get a quorum of people that want to do that walking tour, then we can do that. But in any case, at 3:30 or so, we need to have our concert dress ready. We'll meet at the hotel, get on the bus, and drive to the university, which is our venue. It's only like a 5-minute drive, but it's a little bit too far to walk. It's like 2 miles or something. And it's not on pedestrian-friendly streets to get there. Unlike in Tbilisi, when we walk 15 minutes to the venue, it's pretty straightforward how to get there. So we drive, and then rehearsal, free time, concert, and then the banquet afterwards. So that's kind of the final banquet, as I have there on the brochure, for the full group. The following morning, those that are finishing their tour in Tbilisi will head on the bus with my Georgian guide back to Tbilisi, arriving around 1 p.m. And we'll go back to the hotel where we had stayed before. Some of you will be heading right to the airport. Others are staying for a day or two, and it'll be free time in Tbilisi. And you'll be in a comfortable, familiar zone because we've already been there twice before. For those going to Svaneti, which is a good half of the group, I'll be going with you, and we'll be taking separate transportation from Kutaisi, probably 2 20-seat minibuses. Since we're about 24 people now going to Svaneti, I didn't want to rent a big bus because it's kind of, it's unwieldy to get the big bus around up in the mountains. So I think we're going to split into 2 minibuses to go to Svaneti. All right, so that's you can see the program in Svaneti, Armenia. This is a high Caucasus zone. They speak their own language. They have their own cuisine. They have their own folk music style, which is very archaic, ancient, kind of vertical chordal structure, they call it, rather than sort of horizontal linear melodies. And when we go there, we're going to spend some time doing workshops with one of the foremost inheritors of this Svan culture, this Vacho Pilpani, who's mentioned there on Saturday, May 31st. He's the son of Islam Pilpani, who for 50 years directed the state ensemble of Svaneti. So in the family, they know all the songs, all the variants. And Vacho is a big personality and fun to be around. And he speaks some English. And So we're going to do some workshops with him. He also happens to be the director or the vice director of the cultural center in Mestia. So he's important for getting us our concert venue there and bringing his choir members to perform with us and then have a party with us afterwards. So that first day we're in Svaneti, we're going to be doing workshops and a concert and a banquet right there in the central town, which is called Mestia. That leaves us with one final day up there, which is Sunday, June 1st, which will be a free day for people to go for a hike. There's I think I mentioned a previous version of the brochure. There's an option to do a 4-hour round trip walk up to the Chaladi Glacier. And there's also an incredible National Museum, unbelievable collection of medieval icons and manuscripts and so forth, and a few house museums and churches with frescoes in them. But I'm offering this cultural program, which we'll get into Jeeps that I rent, and we'll drive off into the hinterlands to see some really remote villages and small little chapels with frescoes from the 11th, 12th centuries, and we'll get to sing in various places. And you'll get to see like really off the beaten track mountain villages. We'll be back in the evening for our dinner there. And then the final day for this extension is Monday, June 2nd, where we have a driving day. Basically, we need to get to from Svaneti all the way back to Tbilisi. We'll break up that long drive with a number of stops, and we'll plan to get back to the Moxie Hotel in central Tbilisi again and have a final dinner with the remaining group members there. And the following day, June 3rd, is basically everyone's getting on airplanes to fly home. So that's the itinerary. Any quick comments or questions or about the itinerary before we open it up to other topics?
There was one question about altitude. What's the highest altitude that we will be facing?
Right. Mestia, where we're going to be sleeping, is under 6,000 feet. So it's like 5,700 or something if memory serves. And that's what's important. No matter how high you go in a particular day, where you sleep it's what affects your blood, as far as I understand. On the 4x4 Jeep trip, we will be going up to Ushguli, which is the highest altitude village in Svaneti, and that's at 2,200 meters, if I remember correctly. So I'm not sure what that is in feet, maybe more like 7,500, something like that. So really not getting into any high altitude zones on that Svaneti extension, but it sure feels like it. We're surrounded by huge peaks. Mount Elbrus is right there, 18,000 feet, snow covered with glaciers all year round. And we see that when we're in these valleys, but you can see all these peaks everywhere around you. And if the weather cooperates with us, we'll have fantastic views while we're up there.
I would just say, John, the trip to Ushguli is, again, I sort of feel like if you're going to go to Georgia, you really should go to Svaneti, and if you go to Svaneti, you really should go to Ushguli, because it's just different from anywhere else, anywhere else in Georgia or anywhere else anywhere. So, if you're thinking about doing that optional tour to Ushguli, you should definitely do it.
Yeah. Okay, I see a question about bringing laptops. Absolutely bring laptops. We don't have any, knock on wood, I haven't had any burglaries of any items in 20 years of leading tours here. It's really a safe country. Of course, you gotta, use your common sense, but absolutely you can bring your equipment, your laptops. We can leave stuff on our bus. It's going to be locked. The driver's always with it. Buses are safe. People don't break into buses. So you should be fine bringing your tech. What kind of weather can we anticipate on tour? It's going to be warm, I would say. It's going to be, potentially between 75 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, late May. We're in summer. And there is a thunderstorm cycle that happens at that time of year where evaporation coming off the Black Sea in the morning, forms into thunderclouds and moves into the mountains in the afternoon. So those going to Svaneti, we can expect sunny mornings, cloudy afternoons with potential like drenching downpours for 15 minutes at 5 p.m. Do any of you live in places like this? It's like Ireland or Hawaii. I don't know. It's like, so that weather cycle could happen in Svaneti around June 1st. Like I said, the peaks are covered in glaciers, and then down on the Black Sea, it could be, very hot, and so you get a lot of these sort of weather patterns. Other questions? ATMs are everywhere in Georgia, especially in the kind of downtown touristy zones that we're going to be in. You can withdraw uh, local currency and US dollars from all the ATMs. Also, you can use credit cards basically everywhere now. But on my tours, I always advise people to have some local cash, because when we go to remote churches, there are often little village ladies selling something. They're selling some dried fruit, or they're selling some socks that they've made, and of course, they don't have
They don't take credit cards.
Right. And those are precisely the places that you want to leave some of your tourist dollars, like in the local economies, supporting super local people. So I often have to, that's why I've learned to say it's good to have $50 worth of local currency in your pocket. You're probably going to need it.
Yeah.
And if in any case, if you don't use it on the tour, the airports do not rip you off when you want to trade the money back. And when you go to Tbilisi Airport, there's exchange bureaus in there open day and night, and they don't charge commission. You can just, any extra local currency that you have, you can convert back to dollars or spend it in a souvenir shop or give it as tips or whatever,
Right. Okay.
So
Thank
it's
you.
always good to have that kind of money in. And I do have a frequently asked questions page on my website, which I will send around. I can actually just type it in now. That has a lot of answers to these kinds of basic questions, including laundry and internet and all that kind of thing.
Right. Classic logistical questions.
Yeah. So there it is.
Perfect.
Other questions? Okay, should we talk about the local political situation here?
Yeah, let's switch and be aware, guys.
I typed a
Post-
question in the chat.
All right, let's get the chat
Hi,
question.
David.
Wait, go ahead.
It's about
What's your question, David?
will it be easy for Georgian friends to get tickets to our Tbilisi concert?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be relying on our Georgian friends, broadly speaking, to help bring the audience, because, and I'll get into this now, talking about protests. A lot of shows have been canceled out of a sort of a performers' protest against what's happening with the government here. So, for example, theaters are still closed now and have been closed for like 3 months, and with no end in sight. So a lot of the performing arts sector has been strongly involved in protesting the government right now. And so that means that some people don't think it's appropriate to go to concert site now. They want to be at the protests. So we need to.
So John, does that mean
Mhm.
that even our singing there is a political statement? Are we being pro-government by
No.
violating that boycott?
No, not at all. In fact, at the protests, people are singing. They're out there singing in the street, and I've been posting these videos to my Facebook page. And if you just type in singing Tbilisi protests into the internet, you see lots and lots of videos of protesters singing every day. And this thrills my heart because, in the Soviet era, the government tried to co-opt ethno musics in every country of the Soviet Union.
Yep.
The cultural elites paid the best performers to be choir directors or orchestra directors, And then they brought in all of the best performers, put them in uniforms, and put them on stage precisely at official events. And it
And
was a
controlled
definitive
them.
support of the regime. And
Yeah.
it was a way that folk music was used to support the regime. And it made it, it was a face, it was a pretty face. And that's well understood here, and that still goes on to some extent. And for example, Rustavi Ensemble is a state ensemble, and yet members of the ensemble might not like this government. So you see the kind of inherent tension that's going on in society right now. You're going to have to trust me and my team to position our concert in the appropriate way, that we're not violating either the protesters' position or be perceived by the government as somehow anti-government. And there is a way to do this. There are some concerts going on now. But to David's question, we will rely on our local friends here that say, hey, this is a fantastic ensemble. They're singing Georgian music. They're our guests here. Let's go out and support them. And we'll be sure to say a couple of words at the beginning of the concert to the effect of, in support of all of the people that are voicing their opinions right now, and in support of peaceful governance of this country and so forth. We're going to try and position ourselves as neutral. And we're not anti-government. We are guests of the Georgian society coming in. And I think that will be a message that's well received. People want to return to some normalcy. They want to have guests coming, appreciating their culture, singing their folklore and their sacred music. The society's hungry for that sense of normality again. So those are some of the things that I'm working on here.
Great, John. Before we get too much into the politics, during rehearsals, will there be anything parallel for the non-singing family members on the tour?
Currently, I don't have that organized. My focus has been on the choir and what the choir needs. So right now, that's free time in general. But what I can do is respond to requests. So if, for example, there's a request, if the non-singers want to get together and say, what do we want to do in Tbilisi on this day? They could come up with a list of requests and write it to me, and I can make that happen. I'm a fixer. I'm a logistics guy. If they want to go on a day trip out of the city, I can organize that. Do they want to have a local guide do a Tbilisi tour just for them with a specific focus on visual arts? Let's go to the 3 visual arts museums in the city. We can do that. But right now, I have not organized.
But let me just add something here for everyone's awareness. Richard Osborne is serving as Gatayo on this tour. And although, John, we appreciate you solving all these problems, feel free to let Richard handle how to get the spouses to this or that thing. Don't feel like you have to handle it all yourself, okay?
Thank you for
No, yeah.
me. I'm glad to help out too, as Gatayo.
But I think we're mostly going to need Richard for the singers, since you are a singer, Richard, and you're going to be at the rehearsals.
Yeah.
So, I am aware that there's a fair number of people that are coming that are not going to be in these rehearsals, and it would be nice to have some parallel events organized. So, that's the type of thing that now needs to come together in the next couple of months. And if I had some direction, if there was a ringleader among the spouses, let's say, that could be in touch with me, then that would help give me some guidelines, some focus.
Oh, the question. Some don't know the word Gatayo. That is Italian for cat herder. On the Verona Garda tour, I served in that role, and I thought, well, what should it be called? Well, there are goat herds and there are cow herds, so there must be a cat herd, and that's the word. It's GATTIAIO. There you go. Okay. Anyway, sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
And I
Any
told
questions?
Lewis I'm ready for some hissing and some scratching occasionally.
Any questions?
Yeah, so let's I think it's worth bringing up the your understanding of the attitude toward Russians right now. And of course, this is part of the reason why we're presenting as the Yale University International Chorus, not the Yale University Russian Chorus. So could you speak to that from your perspective?
Sure. Okay, so the relationship between Georgia and Russia, obviously very complicated, long history. How can I even summarize it here? But let's say this. Georgians have an issue with Russian foreign policy. The issue is with the Kremlin, with Putin and cronies. It doesn't have to do with the Russian language. My wife is fluent in Russian. My father-in-law went to a Russian school and served in the Soviet army. Some of his best friends to this day are Russians. So it's not about Russian music, culture, people, language. It's about foreign policy. It's about the thuggish, kind of imperialistic, patronizing attitude that Russians have towards all of the ethnic peoples that they incorporated into the Tsarist Empire in the early 19th century. And then that continued in the Soviet era. So that attitude is what Georgians have a problem with. And sometimes, you know, more radical voices in Georgia take it another level. So at the beginning of the Ukraine war, we saw bars and cafes here in Georgia that said, you know, we don't accept Russian speaking clients here. In other words, if you want to come in here and order a beer, you better be speaking Georgian or English or another language. And this was affronting to Russians who took photos of that sign and put it out on Russian social media, and it was a big deal in Russia. Oh, the Georgians hate us, you know. But that was just one cafe owner who did that. You know, the majority of people here. I should also say, when Putin put out the first call for what's the right word, when he the draft, when he was saying all fighting age men in Russia have to come to the military after like 1 year after starting the war. And there was a huge exodus out of Russia, and about 300,000 Russians came through Georgia. A lot of them moved on to Cyprus, Istanbul, wherever they went. But about 50 or 60,000 stayed here and settled here and live here now. So there's a lot more Russians in here than there were, you know, during the pandemic or any time in the 20 years that I've been here. There are a lot more Russians right now. You can hear Russian on the street. But this doesn't seem to be a problem because most Georgians assume, and probably correctly, that the Russians that are living here in Tbilisi are not pro-Kremlin. They're not pro-Putin. That you don't see like far-right Russian groups here assembling and disseminating paraphernalia or staging, you know, street protests in support of the Kremlin. That would just be annihilated by Georgian society. So Georgians en masse support Ukraine and are anti-Russia. It bears noting that Russia still occupies two regions of Georgia, which represent about 20% of the landmass of Georgia. And it's in the Constitution, the Georgian Constitution, to fight for the retrieval or rapprochement or the reintegration of those two regions back into sovereign Georgia. And the only hindrance to that is Russia, who serves this kind of self-imposed peacekeeping role. But officially, but unofficially, what they're doing is maintaining frozen conflicts in all of their small border states so that none of them can join NATO. All of the political pundits that study this region know that that's the real reason that we have conflicts between Armenia and Azerbaijan, two occupied regions in Georgia, the Transnistria region in Moldova, Donetsk region in Ukraine. And if Belarusia ever decided to go towards Europe, they have a plan to make a border conflict in Belarus so that it could never join NATO. This is kind of the Putin playbook that's happening in this part of the world, and most people understand it for what it is. So those are some of the attitudes towards Russia. Meanwhile, there's an older generation that remembers a time in the Soviet era when there was a lot of friendly Russians that came as tourists to Georgia. This was a tourist destination for Soviet citizens. And they're happy to welcome the 1 million+ Russian tourists that come every year by playing the role of the happy Georgian farmer who can sing and present wine. And that was always the stereotype for Russians of Georgians. They're either savage mountaineer warriors or they're like happy farmers that sing and dance. Educated Georgians really resent that sort of that stereotype. People like my wife have PhDs and are patriots and know more Russian history than most Russians. They don't appreciate that kind of attitude from Russian tourists, but there are a fair number of older Georgians who are happy to take the paycheck to play that role. So let's see. If you come and you speak Russian to Georgians, they're not going to have a problem with that at all. It's a lingua franca. It's a mode of communication. It will be clear from your accent that you're not likely, from Russia. And by the nature of your context and the conversation topic, they will easily gather that you're not a pro-Putin supporter. So I don't think anyone should be bashful about coming here and speaking the Russian language. It'll be, it's a mode of communication, and it doesn't signify your political allegiance. Other questions? Lead me on here.
How do you have your fingers on the pulse in Armenia and sort of aware of the political situation there and how that might compare and contrast with what you're seeing in Georgia?
Yeah. No, Armenia is a completely different cultural zone. It's surprising. With these two countries right next to each other, they both converted to Christianity at the same time in about 300 AD. They've both had the same enemies and waves of Persians and Mongolians and Turks and so forth over the centuries, both subsumed in the Tsarist Empire and the Soviet Empire. And yet they're so different. And different languages. Armenian language is Indo-European, whereas Georgian and Svanetian languages are not Indo-European. They're different ethnic groups. They're different bloodlines. They perceive the world in very different ways. And so they're kind of like uneasy cousins. Georgians and Armenians have never warred against each other, but they also don't really like each other. They don't really trust each other. And the cultures are quite different. So right now in Armenia, you're going to have this profound feeling of heartache. They just lost Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, in that pandemic. The Azeris got the green light from Putin. Everyone was distracted with the pandemic, and the Azeris had been stockpiling attack weapons with all of the oil money, selling their oil to the West, and they took back Nagorno-Karabakh, and about 10,000 people died in 6 weeks. It was nasty. But both sides lost about 5,000. And Armenia had its heart ripped out because they'd set a lot of their identity into recontrolling that region. They took it in a war between 1988 and 1994. And it had only been given to Azerbaijan by Joseph Stalin in 1921. So this is a region that had always been part of Armenia, especially in their imagination, full of medieval churches and castles that were Armenian. But through the centuries, it was controlled by whoever the strongest invader was. So it was often controlled by some Persian general, who was a vassal to Isfahan. And the Armenians were just the local people there. They were the serf class. They were the workers, and they were in the monasteries. They were the learned people were writing manuscripts in these manuscripts in the monasteries. And the famous person that invented the Armenian alphabet, Mesrops Mashtots, he's from a monastery in Artsakh, and he's like the founder of the Georgian or the Armenian, literary culture, and the alphabet is super important to them. So to gain Artsakh was huge for their identity, and they put all their diaspora billions into rebuilding that place. I went there, was brand new roads, new schools, new tractors in the fields. You couldn't believe it because Armenia itself was impoverished, especially in the regions outside Yerevan. And we drive into this one rural region, Nagorno-Karabakh, and the billionaire diaspora types had pumped in so much money that it really looked like Pennsylvania or something. I mean, it was well-developed rural agrarian area. So I say Pennsylvania because I grew up there. Unfortunately, that was lost, and a lot of young men lost their lives. Everyone in Armenia knows someone who died or someone who was injured. Plus, it was a blow to their identity. So that's the main thing. And they blame Russia. Why? Because unlike Georgia, who kicked out the Russian military base in 2004, the Armenians never kicked out the Russian military base. And the reason that the successive Armenian governments have allowed the Russians to maintain big bases in their country is as a deterrent against Azerbaijani revenge on the Nagorno-Karabakh war. So the fact that Azerbaijan attacked Nagorno-Karabakh and Putin didn't lift a finger to defend it really pissed off everybody in Armenia. So there's a lot of anti-Russian sentiment as a result of that war. You see how the context is totally different than Georgia. Yeah, I mean, Armenians' number one enemy are Turks at large. All Turks are their mortal enemies, starting with the Seljuks and every Turk since. And Azeris, they just lump with Turks. They're basically the same ethnic group, same language. They just differ in religion. The Azeris are Shia because they were always under the Persian Empire, whereas the Turks, are Sunni. So that's the deal with Armenia. They're a landlocked country. They don't have much economy. They have war with Azerbaijan, Turks on the other side. Their other neighbors are Iran to the south, a deeply problematic country, obviously, and Georgia to the north, their only other border, which Armenians refuse to be friendly with. Armenians always find a way to stick their foot in their mouth, do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing from a Georgian perspective. It's just like unnecessary, undiplomatic comments, come out of Armenia, where from a Georgian perspective, you're like, palm on the forehead. And they are beholden to Russian oligarchs who bought up Armenian assets at the breakup of the Soviet Union. So Russian interests control the power grid, all the mining, telecommunications. They basically own the place down there. Whereas in Georgia, Georgian oligarchs bought up a lot of the assets. And so there's not so much Russian control in those major sectors in Georgia, but there is in Armenia. So Armenians are really beholden to the Kremlin and have been over the last 35 years. This anti-Russian sentiment in Armenia is pretty new, like just since this Nagorno-Karabakh conflict in 2021. We're going to get a lot more of this on the tour. So maybe you can stop me. I don't want to bore everybody. And let's just talk about how this stuff is going to affect us on tour.
That's helpful. I think that's enough for now. Ernie?
Yeah, could you talk just very briefly about the specific standoff in Georgia right now? Because I think we've danced around that a little bit.
Sure.
To the extent that you feel comfortable doing that. Because
No,
I feel like there is a standoff right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
No,
so
you're
just
right.
let's lay that out.
I haven't really laid that out. Absolutely.
Because that's because you're there.
I'm there. I'm here. My kids go to school 3 blocks from where the protests happen every day. First of all, I'll just say I'm happy to be here because this is a real democracy right now. We are not in Azerbaijan. We can voice our opinions. We can protest on the streets, and we're not getting disappeared into jails like you would in an autocracy, like in a Russia or an Azerbaijan or one of these other countries where you can't even write a blog post that's anti-oligarch or you just get disappeared. So we are in a democracy and people are fighting for their particular ideological positions. It's a great place to be, a great place to raise a family. It's safe. The protests are localized to right in front of Parliament, and they start every day around 8 p.m. and go to about midnight. I mean, it's relatively peaceful, very organized. The rest of the day, everybody's doing everything. People are walking along the street right there. Cars are driving, everything. Just when they started, you probably saw a lot of images of like protesters firing fireworks and, police in combat formation, sort of repelling them. That was the first couple of weeks of the protests, which were right after the parliamentary elections in late October. I'm a Georgian citizen, so I voted in those elections as well as those in the U.S. And after those elections, which international observers said were falsified to the extent maybe 13% of the vote was falsified. And that was enough to really piss off people because that 13% would have meant that this current government would not have had a majority and would not have been able to convene parliament. Because they ended up getting 54%. And we have a parliamentary prime minister system here like England. So you get 54% of the parliament, you get to elect a prime minister who appoints all of the ministers and you control everything. Minus 13%, they would have had 41% or something like that. Then they have to form a coalition government or go to another election, and a lot more voices could have been at the table. This government hasn't started any wars. They haven't done anything drastically bad, but they're generally perceived to be incompetent and stagnant, and nothing really has improved very much in 12 years that they've been in power. They're backed by an oligarch who's worth 7 billion. The GDP of Georgia is about 20 billion, so he has a lot of influence. That's a big percentage of the total GDP. I mean, we have a few oligarchs in America, but their wealth is nothing compared to like the entire GDP of the US in terms of their
Yes.
ability. So there was a good pie chart about that came out. Even the Russian oligarchs don't have the same percentage of the Russian economy that the one Georgian does.
Yeah.
So also, the protests from last spring had to do with this controversial law that was passed by this unpopular government, which allows them to crack down on NGOs that receive money from abroad. NGOs including independent media, organizations that support minorities of every kind, and basically a lot of NGOs that were pushing Western identity politics, which are not popular among conservative Georgians, church-going Georgians. And this government, similar to the current government in America, tapped into that unease with Western identity politics and manipulated it and used a lot of propaganda to get the support that they had to pass this law. But the protests have really flared up after the parliamentary elections in October, like I mentioned, and have been going on daily. And right now, the demands of the protesters are redo these elections, free all the protesters that have been put in prison. There's like 100 protesters that have been put in prison and are just being held there until their trials, which keep getting postponed. So what's the legal term for that? Like detention without, they haven't been
Corpus, yeah.
accused of a crime necessarily. Like they haven't even been, I don't know what it is. So those are the demands of the protesters. The main one is new elections. This government's illegitimate. Just the president of Georgia, whose term just ended, a woman named Salome Zurabishvili. She just met with Zelensky today in Munich, I was reading. So she remains active on the international political scene. The entire Georgian diaspora is against this government. They've just run their course. They haven't done anything positive. It's a small group of people hanging out around this oligarch, and they're not good at governing the country, and it's time for them to go. But they refuse to step aside, and so they're trying to influence parliamentary elections, even buying votes and intimidating employees. The government's the biggest employer in the country. I think there's maybe 3 million people in the country, and the government employs 300,000. And all of them were pressured to vote for the government, and all of their relatives too. I mean, to the point where someone was at the voting booths checking whether they had come and had brought their relatives or not. There were checklists and people checking off. And if you didn't, your job is threatened. So that's, and this is illegal by Georgian law, but they control the judiciary branch, the government does. And there were a lot of voting infractions in the last election. And so that's what people are protesting right now. How will this affect our tour? Not much. I mean, unless you want to go out there and protest, which the State Department, of course, will tell you not to do. But my wife and I have been to protest. All of our friends are there, and it might be interesting to go and see what it's all about. Generally, we don't want to stay after midnight. That's when the cops come out and say, all right, we got to clear these streets. And so that's when the sort of hardcore protesters stay out and the family people end up going home. There are even kids at these protests, kids. So what else can I say about it? It makes my publicity work a little more challenging, because some of my friends that are protesting there say this is not a time to be going to concerts unless we're singing at this protest. And then there are other people who are saying, no, we need the theater. We need the concerts to give ourselves energy to keep up the fight. Let's bring back the theater and let's stage, great works of protest art, whether it's a play or, programmatic music or what have you. Let's get the orchestras going. We can even put on concerts and make the beneficiary kitchens that are supplying food for the protesters. So there's kind of two different opinions on whether to be part of cancel culture, cancel everything except for what's happening at the protest, or let's rejuvenate our cultural life and use it to support the ideology of the protesters. So that's kind of, I find that exciting. And, we learn civics, we study civics in American schools, but how often do we see it in action? Like, we cast votes, we go to 4th of July parades, we read newspapers with our political ideology, but this is going on right now every day in Tbilisi right here. People are fighting for their democracy, their right to govern and determine their future. They do not want an autocracy here, and that's more and more what it's looking like with this oligarch promoting his team year after year, and it's becoming more and more of a sham democracy, something like you see in Russia. They put on elections, but it's the same guy every time. So
right.
I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Okay, well, we've gone an hour and a quarter here. Any final questions before we break?
A couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
Thanks to John for amazing work on all of this. Really looking
Thank
forward
you,
to the tour. Yeah, this sounds incredible.
Yeah, it's a vibrant place to live here, but I love Georgian polyphony. That's why I first came here. And I make my living now running this tourist company. I don't lead tours just here. I'm going to Sicily next month. I chartered a boat off the Turkish coast. I lead tours in Ethiopia. But this is my home base, and I speak the language here, and so I love leading tours in Georgia. And this kind of a tour is my favorite, because we get to bring local singers together with American singers, and it's a real cultural exchange. And like I said at the beginning, music is that universal language that we all speak and love, and we know the power of it. We know even if you don't speak someone's verbal language, this language of music is the best communication. So questions, let's see. Is there a Russian-speaking ethnic population in Georgia? No, there's not. Just the Russian emigres that have come after the Ukrainian war. Most of them are under 30 years old. They're digital nomads. You walk around in Tbilisi, you see these new co-working spaces, and there's 50 people in there on laptops. That's the kind of, and they're ethnic. They're from Russia, so they're not an ethnic. If I understand the question properly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one. Is the government pro-Russian or just afraid of Russia? That's a $1 million question. No one really knows. What's the deal with this oligarch? For 10 years, he towed the line of the Georgian Constitution says we're moving towards NATO, we're moving towards Europe. It's enshrined in the Constitution. And this oligarch said, okay, we're going to pay lip service to that at least. And that was the official line. But since the Ukraine war, it's been a 180-degree turn. Georgia did not join the sanctions against Russia. The Ukrainians withdrew their ambassador and their diplomatic corps from Georgia. The oligarchs' minions in government have been agitating against all of the Western ambassadors, insulting the U.S. ambassador. I mean, unnecessary, like very undiplomatic behavior over the last 3 years, which from an outside observer's perspective really looks intentional. It's like a stage by stage antagonistic behavior that's relatively new. And then the local government can turn around and say, oh, the U.S. partners are not doing what we asked, or they're really not as helpful as they used to be, or whatever. But it's really coming from them first. There's been a change in policy in this Georgian government. It feels much more anti-Western. They are promoting propaganda, like family values propaganda within religious circles. Does this ring a bell? So the prime minister comes out and gives speeches, and you feel like he's not talking to Tbilisi civil society, which is where all the educated cultural people this is like a big one city country. We have 1 million plus in Tbilisi out of 3 million total population. And he's really speaking to like rural religious conservatives sometimes. It just sounds like gobbledygook to the Tbilisi civil society. Okay, so it's unclear what is hanging over this oligarch's head. Why did he make an about face during the Ukraine war? I'm going to put up my hand and say Putin made a direct call and said, you better be with me or you're going to be next. I mean, some sort of direct threat happened, and the oligarch said, okay, we don't want to be the next Ukraine. So afraid of Russia is probably the correct answer. And we have a right to be afraid of Russia. They're completely unhinged, and they're the neighbor right there. I mean, just look at pictures of Mariupol. That's about the same size as Tbilisi. That is just insane to think about, that with no qualms, from a distance, Russia will just bomb a city of 1 million into smithereens, with no qualms. This is in the modern era. So, that's very frightening to think about. That's not happening at all. Russia is totally preoccupied with Ukraine. There's no threat of invasion, they have what they want here right now, which is kind of if not an outwardly spoken pro-Russian government in Georgia, certainly acting on behalf of Russian interests, which is to push away NATO, push away the European Union, push away the U.S. ambassadors and USAID, to rebuff anything that George Soros is funding. That's what this current government is doing, and that plays right into what Putin wants. Therefore, George is on relatively good terms with Russia at the sort of government to government level, even though the majority of the Georgian population is not happy with that. So that should leave you rest assured that whatever Russia's doing in Ukraine, and it's horrible, that's not happening in the Caucasus at all right now. Russia's very satisfied with the direction of the Caucasian countries. Final question here. Should we be careful about what we say on Facebook? No, not at all. I mean, I might need to be a little bit careful because I'm a visible expat in Georgia and I'm also a Georgian citizen, therefore subject to Georgian law. Like, I'm not posting every single big anti-government thing on my Facebook, even though with friends I'm openly against this government. But and my wife might post that because she's a Georgian citizen and there are thousands of people posting anti-government things on their own Facebook pages. But for me, I'm slightly different because um, I'm not one of tens of thousands of anti-government Georgians. I'm an expat, and there are only a couple of hundred of us who are like, you know, well, there's a few thousand, but I mean, a couple of hundred that have lived here for 20 years and are like citizens of the country. So you shouldn't worry at all about saying whatever you want on Facebook. Georgian government doesn't care. As visitors, it won't matter. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask. A couple of years ago, when we were in Armenia, when I was in Armenia on your tour, there was sort of danger zone if you were driving near the border with Azerbaijan, and I assume that now, because that is over, that there's no such risk anymore. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's nothing happening between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I mean, there's no hot conflict at all. There's no troops on high alert or anything. There's verbal sparring in newspapers and so forth. And the kind of hot spot is down near Nagorno-Karabakh, which is in the far southeastern corner. It's like 12-hour drive from where we're going to be. We're not going to be anywhere near there. So no issue about the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict.
David Gilman has his hand up.
Yeah. John, not to raise an alarm unduly, but from what I've read and from looking at the map, it seems like Russia has expanded the boundaries of South Ossetia a little bit towards the highway. Does that concern you?
No, that's also like they do that every 6 months just to keep their troops occupied over there. They have Russian troops stationed in South Ossetia region and they're bored. You know, they got nothing to do. So I'm imagining this, but I think their commanding officers just like, okay, we're going to set up all the barbed wire like 10 meters over there. It's every 6 months they move it like 10 meters. It's outrageous. I mean, we're talking barbed wire, like huge rolls of barbed wire. They move it like 10 meters somewhere. No, this is not concerning. Nothing has happened on that border at all since 2008. It's just absolutely quiet. Nothing happening. Like I said, Putin actually withdrew like all the troops from that region. They're on the Ukrainian front. So there's no like real military presence there. Georgians don't really have a military and aren't really, aren't agitating to start anything with anybody. So you shouldn't worry about anything having to do with like military action. There's nothing that's like a hot spot with troops with armed weapons. Like that's not really a reality right now. Thank goodness.
Okay, well, thank you for staying up late with us, John. We really appreciate it. And if you have further questions, I'm sure John will be happy to answer them. We will post this recording, and I'm also going to post a link to the political section for people who are not on the tour who are curious about these issues so that they can be educated as well. So thanks again, John.